The elevator doors slid open with a soft chime, revealing a marble corridor bathed in sterile morning light. Olivia Hartman stepped out, her heels clicking against the polished floor, her pulse thrumming louder than the city noise below. In one hand, she clutched her purse. In the other, her phone displayed the message that changed everything. A single line from her cousin Ryan, clearly meant for someone else. "Don't tell Olivia. She doesn't deserve anything." That text had arrived last night. It came minutes after she lit a candle on her grandmother's old windowsill, whispering goodbye one more time. She hadn't even been told the will reading was scheduled. She was never invited. That much was clear. She had debated going. Part of her told herself to stay away. That the exclusion was their way of punishing her for loving too much, caring too deeply, not chasing wealth like the rest of them. But another part, the part that had always believed in doing what felt right, told her she needed to be there. Not for the inheritance, but for the truth. As she entered the conference room on the top floor of the law office in downtown Chicago, the chatter stopped. Her Aunt Janice turned first, face stiffening, then rearranging into something polite and poisonous. "Olivia, this is a private meeting. Family only." Olivia met her gaze. "I am family." Her Uncle Greg stood up. "You weren't invited. We're handling this with the attorney as Grandma intended." But before another word could be said, a voice rose from the far end of the room. "Miss Hartman," the lawyer said, rising from his seat and adjusting his glasses, "you are exactly where you are supposed to be. In fact, according to your grandmother's will, you are the only person who must be present." The silence that followed was instant and absolute. Olivia's heart pounded in her chest. Her eyes locked on the envelope in the lawyer's hand. All the eyes in the room turned to her. The war had begun, and none of them saw it coming. Olivia Hartman was 29 years old. But in certain light, with her posture upright and expression composed, she carried the presence of someone older, someone weathered by responsibility. Her figure was lean from years of 12-hour shifts, her movements precise and economical, like someone who had no time to waste on frivolity. She wore navy blue scrubs beneath a gray wool coat that hung loosely around her frame, the kind of coat bought once, worn often, and cared for with reverence. Around her neck was a thin silver chain bearing a heart-shaped pendant. Inside that pendant was a picture of her father. It had once belonged to her grandmother. Olivia didn't wear it for fashion. She wore it for grounding. For memory. For truth. She had become the head nurse at a hospice care center just outside the city 2 years ago, where she specialized in end-of-life transitions. It was the kind of job that drained a person emotionally, but Olivia had chosen it deliberately. Not because she was a glutton for grief, but because she believed deeply in giving people dignity as they let go. She knew what it meant to lose someone too early. Her father had died when she was only 9 years old, a construction site collapse that became a headline for 2 days before being forgotten by everyone except her mother and her. Her mother, Denise, raised her working double shifts at a local grocery store. They lived in a modest one-bedroom apartment, where Olivia slept in a pull-out sofa for most of her adolescence. They didn't have wealth, but they had warmth. Every Sunday, however, Olivia would be picked up by her grandmother, Eleanor Hartman, and driven to the grand Tudor-style house in Oak Park. That house, with its leaded glass windows and smell of lemon polish, felt like a second life. In that home, she read books beside a woman who believed tea and wisdom solved everything. Eleanor was a matriarch with quiet power. She had been widowed young, raised 3 children, and then, when most would retreat into comfort, spent her retirement years volunteering at libraries, organizing food drives, and hosting neighborhood gatherings. She wore neutral cardigans and old pearls, gave generously without fanfare, and maintained handwritten letters with people she hadn't seen in decades. She often told Olivia, "What matters most can't be appraised." Among her 3 children, Olivia's father, Michael, had always been the outlier. He had rejected the family business, Hartman Investments, and chose instead to teach high school literature. That decision, though never stated aloud, marked him as a disappointment. His death had been tragic, but quietly convenient for his older siblings, Janice and Greg, who no longer had to explain his absence at board meetings. As Olivia grew older, the differences between her and her extended family sharpened like a blade. Her cousins went to Ivy League schools, interned at banks by 17, and posted curated photos from ski lodges and yachts. Olivia worked part-time in college, volunteered at assisted living homes, and chose a field where her salary barely covered rent. She never complained. She never envied. She simply existed in quiet defiance of the family narrative. But Eleanor saw her. She saw Olivia's hands, worn but gentle. Her gaze, calm but unyielding. Their bond wasn't loud, but it was unbreakable. When Eleanor fell ill with Parkinson's, it was Olivia who showed up twice a week, who clipped her fingernails, massaged her hands, read her old letters aloud when her eyesight dimmed. The others sent flowers. Olivia brought soup. The others asked about stocks. Olivia asked how she was sleeping. What Olivia didn't know then was that her visits were being recorded, not by cameras, but by memory, by a grandmother who had always measured love in action. And Olivia had passed the test without ever knowing it was one. The first signs were subtle. It started with a phone call that went unanswered, then a scheduled Sunday visit abruptly cancelled by Eleanor's full-time caregiver, who hesitated before explaining, "Your aunt said today wasn't a good day." Olivia didn't argue, but the feeling settled deep in her gut, like cold metal. The next week, her access was reduced to a narrow 2-hour window, tucked into Sunday afternoons when the house was often crowded with surprise visits from cousins or aunts who hadn't shown up in months. Conversations with her grandmother became fragmented, interrupted by doorbells, loud voices, or the constant shuffling of presents that made intimacy impossible. At first, Olivia tried to reason with herself. Maybe they really were trying to keep Eleanor from exhaustion. Maybe they didn't realize how much she meant to her. But those illusions faded quickly. One evening, after a long shift, she arrived at the house with Eleanor's favorite oatmeal cookies and was told, again, that her grandmother was resting. When she asked to simply leave the package, she caught a glimpse of her cousin Vanessa's coat on the foyer bench. Olivia didn't confront anyone. Instead, she handed the cookies to the caregiver, nodded silently, and drove away, gripping the steering wheel with trembling fingers. Her exclusion didn't stop at visits. That Thanksgiving, the family dinner came and went without a word. She saw it only through Vanessa's Instagram, a collection of perfectly lit photos featuring Eleanor propped up on cushions like a fragile ornament. Olivia's absence wasn't mentioned in any caption. She called her grandmother that night, careful with her tone. "Did you enjoy Thanksgiving?" she asked. There was a pause. "Yes, though I missed you. I thought work kept you away." Olivia blinked. So even Eleanor hadn't known. That realization hit harder than she expected. By Christmas, Olivia wasn't even pretending anymore. She dropped off a handmade blanket and a small photo album through the caregiver, who whispered quietly, "She asked for you this morning." Olivia nodded, swallowed the ache in her throat, and left. She had begun to understand that this was orchestrated. Her access, her place, her role in Eleanor's life, everything was being erased, replaced with a carefully curated version of the family that Olivia had never truly belonged to. The final blow came weeks after Eleanor passed away. Olivia hadn't even received the call directly. Instead, it was Mrs. Dean, Eleanor's night nurse, who phoned in tears. "She's gone, Olivia." She went peacefully. "But I thought you should know, they didn't plan to tell you right away." Olivia stood frozen in her apartment, phone pressed against her ear. The silence screaming louder than any siren. The funeral was cold and formal. Olivia was seated in the third row behind distant cousins and family friends who hadn't visited in years. No one looked at her. No one acknowledged her. Her uncle Greg gave a eulogy that spoke more about the Hartman name and its legacy than the woman who had loved stories, lemon tea, and crocus flowers. Olivia clenched her jaw throughout, her eyes never leaving the casket. She expected nothing after that. She had grieved her grandmother in silence, in the quiet sanctuary of their shared memories, and told herself that no legal proceeding or inheritance could taint what they had. But then the message came. It was a text, sent late one night by mistake from Ryan, her cousin, clearly meant for someone else. "Readings tomorrow at 9. Don't tell Olivia. She doesn't deserve anything." Olivia stared at it, numb. A second message followed, this time directed at her. "Ignore that. Sent to the wrong person." She didn't reply. Instead, she sat at her small kitchen table, the refrigerator humming in the background, and let the truth sink in. They were excluding her from the will reading, just as they had excluded her from everything else. She didn't sleep that night. Her thoughts circled the same question, why? She had never fought over money. Never asked for anything. Was it really because she didn't conform to their rules? Because she chose service over success? Because she reminded them of her father, the man who had walked away from their empire with a diploma and a dream of teaching poetry to teenagers? By morning, the ache turned into something else. Something steadier. Olivia dressed carefully, choosing a navy blue dress her grandmother once complimented. She pinned her hair back in a modest knot and wore the silver heart pendant over her chest like a quiet declaration. She didn't want to look like someone fighting for money. She wanted to look like someone who belonged, because she did. When she arrived at the law office, the receptionist looked confused but polite. "May I help you?" Olivia gave her name. A flicker of recognition crossed the woman's face. She nodded, picked up the phone, and whispered something quickly. Then she gestured toward the conference room down the hall. Inside, the room was already full. Aunt Janice, Uncle Greg, Ryan, Vanessa, and several others sat in stiff suits, sipping from water bottles and speaking in low voices. When they saw her, the conversation stopped. Janice rose immediately. "Olivia," she said, her voice coated with artificial warmth, "you weren't expected. This is a private affair." Olivia said nothing, just held her ground. Then Mr. Randall, the family lawyer, stood up slowly from the end of the table. "She is exactly where she needs to be," he said. He held up a folder. "Because according to Eleanor Hartman's last and final testament, Olivia Hartman is the sole heir." The room collapsed into stunned silence. Olivia's fingers trembled at her sides. Her heart pounded, not from greed or triumph, but from the echo of something deeper. Justice. Recognition. Truth. And in that moment, she understood, the battle hadn't started today. It had been waged quietly, over years of kindness, and today was simply the reckoning. Mr. Randall opened the thick leather-bound folder, his movements deliberate, professional, but Olivia noticed the slight tightening around his jaw as the room's atmosphere shifted from mild tension to barely contained uproar. "Before I begin," he said, voice calm, "I'd like to clarify that Mrs. Eleanor Hartman was my client for over 30 years. I not only managed her estate but knew her personally. Her decisions were made with full mental competence, and I intend to honor them precisely as instructed." Aunt Janice leaned forward, her eyes sharp. "Surely there's been a mistake. We were told everything was already arranged, divided. That's why Olivia wasn't told." Mr. Randall nodded slowly. "Yes, I'm aware of what you were told. But I assure you, nothing should have been distributed yet. And as for Olivia's presence, it isn't just appropriate. It's essential. She is the only individual named in this will." That sentence sent a visible ripple through the room. Ryan muttered something under his breath. Uncle Greg's face turned the color of raw brick. Vanessa's mouth dropped open, then quickly snapped shut as if afraid her shock might betray her. "That's absurd," Greg finally said, voice raised. "Eleanor would never leave everything to one person. Especially not someone who wasn't even part of the family's operations." Mr. Randall raised one hand to stop the protests. "Rather than argue about hypotheticals, let's review what Eleanor wrote herself." He adjusted his glasses and began reading from the document. "I, Eleanor Margaret Hartman, being of sound mind and body, do hereby declare this to be my final will and testament, revoking all prior versions. After thorough consideration and observation over the past years, I have chosen to leave the entirety of my estate, real, financial, and sentimental, to my granddaughter, Olivia Hartman." A sound escaped from Vanessa. Sharp like a gasp choked back too late. Mr. Randall continued without pause. "This includes, but is not limited to, the property at Oak Park, the lakeside house in Wisconsin, all investment portfolios, antiques, jewelry, and personal belongings." The air in the room thickened with disbelief. "A personal letter addressed to Olivia is enclosed, to be read privately unless she chooses otherwise," he added, placing a sealed envelope on the table beside her. Olivia reached for it with trembling fingers. She didn't open it, not yet. Janice stood abruptly. "We won't accept this. She must have manipulated her. This is not Eleanor's voice. It's coercion." Mr. Randall tilted his head slightly. To that point, Mrs. Hartman underwent a full cognitive evaluation 6 months prior to signing this document. In fact, she requested evaluations from 3 separate physicians. All confirmed her full mental capacity. He pulled out signed documentation and placed it neatly in front of the group. She also recorded a video statement at my office the day she signed the will. I have that footage, should any further doubts arise. Silence fell again, but it wasn't the kind that settles. It buzzed, vibrated, the kind of silence that precedes an explosion. Greg spoke now, softer than before, but with dangerous weight. She never trusted us, not after Michael died. She always pitied Denise, let Olivia take advantage of that. You know it. She was old and isolated. Easy to sway. Olivia finally looked up from the letter in her lap. Isolated? You mean surrounded by people who only showed up for photo opportunities, who brought her luxury baskets but never held her hand when her body trembled so badly she couldn't hold a spoon? Ryan stood. You think bringing soup makes you worthy of $1 million inheritance? No, Olivia said quietly, but Grandma did. Mr. Randall cleared his throat again. There's more. Before she passed, Eleanor expressed concern that certain items might be removed from her home without authorization. She had security systems installed, recorded visits, maintained inventory lists. Some of those logs note items that have been seen in the possession of various family members. Should these not be returned within 30 days, she instructed us to initiate legal action. Greg scoffed. That's paranoia, is it? Randall replied, lifting a photo. Because this is the Tiffany lamp from her study, which appeared in a social media post from Vanessa's apartment last month. And this, he slid another paper forward, is a close-up of the diamond tennis bracelet she wore for decades, captured in a gala photo of Janice just 3 weeks after Eleanor's last hospitalization. The color drained from Janice's face. You're twisting this. She would have wanted us to have keepsakes. And yet she documented everything, Randall replied. Eleanor was many things, but careless wasn't one of them. Olivia remained silent through it all. Her heart beat fast, not from triumph, but grief. These were her relatives, people who once held her hand at weddings. Took pictures with her at birthdays, smiled in family albums. But none of it had been real, not when weighed against money. When the folder was closed, and the room sat in breathless disbelief, Olivia opened the letter. Inside, in her grandmother's distinctive script, were words she would remember forever. My dearest Olivia, if you're reading this, it means I'm gone and you've been left to face them alone. But I chose you not out of guilt or spite, but because you carry something they never tried to understand, compassion without agenda. I've watched them all. I've tested. And you, child, were the only one who never failed. I hope this gives you the freedom to do more good in this world. Love always, Grandma. The letter shook in her hands. She looked around the room. Janice sat slumped. Greg stared blankly. Vanessa wiped angry tears. Ryan whispered to his sister something that sounded like lawyer. But it no longer mattered. The will had been read. The truth had been spoken. The storm had only just begun. The aftermath began before Olivia even left the law office. As she stepped out into the parking garage, her phone buzzed violently with incoming calls. First was Janice, then Greg, then Ryan. She didn't answer. By the time she reached her car, 3 voicemails had already been left. The tone wasn't confusion. It was hostility masked in civility. Olivia, it's Aunt Janice. I'm sure this is all some misunderstanding. Call me back, darling. Then Greg, we need to meet. You don't know everything. There are things about the estate your grandmother didn't tell you. We can work something out. By the next morning, the tone had shifted from persuasion to accusation. You manipulated her, one voicemail said. She was vulnerable. You should be ashamed. Then another, cold and clipped, our lawyers will be contacting you. At the hospice center where Olivia worked, the ripple effect hit within days. Her supervisor called her into the office. Olivia, I'm sorry to bring this up, but we've received some anonymous complaints. Calls from families, alleging conflicts of interest. Neglect. Olivia blinked. What? From who? The supervisor looked uncomfortable. They didn't leave names. But we're being pressured to investigate. Olivia's record had always been flawless. Now it was under scrutiny. The same woman who had sat by dying patients for hours, who had missed birthdays to comfort the grieving, was being painted as unprofessional. The weight pressed down hard. She stopped sleeping. She barely ate. Every knock at the door felt like a summons. Every email notification sent her pulse into overdrive. She found herself staring at the front door of her grandmother's house, Her house now, but unable to step inside. When she finally did, it was worse than she imagined. The place had been stripped. Not of furniture, but of soul. The photographs from the hallway were gone. Her grandmother's quilt from the reading chair had vanished. The jewelry box on the dresser was nearly empty. Even the handwritten recipe book with curled pages had been taken. She sank onto the living room sofa, the absence louder than any accusation. They hadn't just stolen objects. They'd tried to erase her grandmother's essence, piece by piece. And for the first time, Olivia let herself cry without shame or restraint. But when the grief finally broke, anger followed. Quiet, controlled, razor sharp. She began searching the house. Deep in the bedroom closet, behind an old cedar trunk, she found a fireproof box. Inside was a small note. For Olivia. Use if needed. There was a journal, 3 labeled USB drives, and a flash of Eleanor's slanted handwriting on the first page. The journal was meticulous. Dates, visits, conversations. Not just feelings, facts. One entry read, Vanessa came today. While Janice spoke with me in the kitchen, Vanessa went upstairs. After they left, I noticed the emerald brooch missing. I've noted it and activated the upstairs hallway camera. Footage is saved. Another, Greg suggested again that I sell the lake house. Claims it's a burden. I had it appraised last week. Value has increased significantly. He does not know this. The USB drives contained video files. Olivia watched the first on her laptop, fingers trembling. Her grandmother sat in her favorite chair, posture upright, voice steady. Today is October 9th. I am recording this with full awareness and purpose. Mr. Randall will verify my condition. The lawyer appeared in the frame, stated the date, and nodded. Then Eleanor looked back into the lens. To whoever is watching this, you may think I've made irrational decisions. You may think my will is a mistake. It isn't. I have observed. I have recorded. And I have made choices accordingly. Video after video, Olivia watched as Eleanor built her defense. Not just legal, but emotional. She named names, cited dates, described moments where masks slipped. Janice told me my will was outdated. Greg asked if I remembered where the antique books were kept. Vanessa offered to help me clean, then asked to borrow the sapphire ring for a charity gala, and never returned it. Olivia brought everything to Mr. Randall the next morning. He didn't speak for a long moment. Then, a smile tugged at the edge of his mouth. Your grandmother, he said softly, was preparing for war. With his help, Olivia hired Sarah Whitman, a litigator known for her precision and spine of steel. Sarah reviewed the journal, the footage, the medical records, and nodded. We're not just defending the will, she said. We're filing cease and desist letters for property theft. We're submitting this to probate court. And we're putting your family on legal notice. Within 48 hours, official letters were sent to every person who had removed property from Eleanor's house. A list of stolen items was attached. Each had to be returned within 7 days, or face formal charges. The video evidence was ready to be submitted with affidavits from the hospice staff, caregivers, and neighbors. Greg's attempt to file a lawsuit contesting the will was immediately countered by a motion to dismiss, with Eleanor's videos attached as exhibits. The reaction was immediate. Greg's lawyer called Sarah in a panic. There's no winning against that footage, he said. We'll discuss withdrawal. Meanwhile, Janice issued a vague social media post. Some people know how to twist kindness into currency. I just pray for them. The comments section erupted in speculation. Olivia didn't respond. She didn't have to. Within the week, packages began arriving at the house. The brooch, the lamp, the recipe book returned without a word. One afternoon, a courier dropped off a box containing the missing jewelry. No note, just silence. And still, they kept calling. Ryan, trying to negotiate. Vanessa, offering to meet just to talk. Janice, leaving voicemails laced with false warmth. But Olivia had shifted. She no longer flinched. She no longer hesitated. Her grandmother hadn't just left her in a state. She had left her armor. And Olivia was finally learning how to wear it. The following week, Sarah arranged a meeting at her firm's downtown office. She insisted on it, not for show, but for resolution. We're laying every card on the table, she told Olivia. Sometimes it's not the lawsuit that wins. It's the silence afterward. Olivia sat at the end of the conference table, composed, in a slate gray dress and a black cardigan her grandmother once wore to church. Sarah took her place beside Olivia, her expression unreadable. One by one, the others arrived. Greg, jaw clenched. Janice, wearing a conservative black suit and a forced smile. Ryan and Vanessa trailing behind, awkward and silent. Each accompanied by legal counsel, except Vanessa, who seemed to shrink into her chair. "Thank you for coming," Sarah began, sliding a sleek folder toward Greg's lawyer. "In this packet you'll find documentation of items removed from Mrs. Hartman's properties, photographic evidence of their current locations, and notarized logs confirming the dates of those removals." She clicked a remote, and the screen behind her lit up. Olivia's grandmother appeared, seated in her armchair, voice steady. "My name is Eleanor Margaret Hartman. Today is September 12th. This video is being recorded voluntarily and with full capacity, as confirmed by my attorney present in the room." The room fell into a stunned hush. Her voice was clear, her gaze direct. Sarah let the video play in full. Then she clicked to the next slide. "This spreadsheet includes the full item inventory, current whereabouts, and estimated financial value. Currently, the total of misappropriated property exceeds $470,000. Janice's lips parted slightly. Greg muttered something to his lawyer. Ryan slouched deeper into his seat. Sarah pressed forward. "Should these items not be returned in full within 7 days, we will proceed with civil litigation and notify the district attorney regarding potential criminal charges under Illinois law." She waited, then added, "Furthermore, any continued public defamation of Ms. Hartman's character or attempts to damage her professional standing will be met with immediate legal response. We are prepared to seek damages." Greg's lawyer whispered something urgent in his ear. Olivia watched him pale slightly. Sarah's tone never wavered. "Eleanor Hartman anticipated your reaction. She created a fortress of documentation. She didn't just write a will. She built a wall of truth." A long silence followed. Then, at last, Greg spoke, voice lower now, defeated. "Perhaps emotions got the best of us. None of us expected this outcome." Olivia answered without venom. "You didn't expect her to see through you." Janice reached for civility. "We were hurt. Confused. She was acting strange toward the end." Sarah raised an eyebrow. Strange? Or simply honest? The meeting ended without ceremony. No apologies. No handshakes. Only withdrawal. One by one, the family's legal representatives conceded. The lawsuit was dropped. The estate formally recognized Olivia as the sole heir. That night, alone in the house, she opened her grandmother's safe again. Inside was a letter, labeled in faded ink, for when the storm settles. She unfolded it slowly. "Dearest Olivia, I never wanted this inheritance to be a burden. I only wanted it to shield you. To give you ground to stand on, should the family ever try to push you down. They may never understand why I chose you. But I hope, someday, they remember who they were before greed made them forget." The next day, Olivia drafted a letter of her own. She sent it, individually, to each relative. It was not an olive branch. It was a door, left slightly ajar. "You may each choose one item from grandmother's personal collection. Not the most valuable, not the rarest, but something that meant something to you, if that memory is real. I don't need an apology. I need honesty." Only a few responded. Ryan asked for a painting Eleanor had once praised during a school project. Vanessa requested a music box from the upstairs hall that used to play during Sunday mornings. Janice chose nothing. Greg returned the sapphire ring with a curt email, no subject line. Olivia logged every item, stored the memories carefully, and kept moving forward. She wasn't rebuilding a family. She was defining her own. One boundary at a time. 6 months passed. The house no longer felt like a battleground. The creaks in the hallway were familiar again, not reminders of what had been taken but echoes of what remained. Olivia had kept the rooms intact, preserving their soul without freezing them in time. The reading nook under the bay window had fresh cushions in Eleanor's favorite shades of blue. The kitchen smelled of cinnamon on most mornings. And in the garden, the lavender bloomed again, alive, defiant, beautiful. She took a leave of absence from work to settle the estate, but the time off turned into something more reflective. Olivia used part of the inheritance to create the Eleanor Hartman Foundation, focused on supporting elderly patients with no family support. She also set up a scholarship at her alma mater, reserved for nursing students specializing in hospice care. It wasn't charity, it was continuation, the kind of legacy Eleanor would have believed in. One rainy afternoon, while organizing drawers in the study, Olivia found an envelope tucked behind the old ledger books. The handwriting was unmistakable. It read, "Amanda, after all is settled." Her grandmother's handwriting had a firmness to it, even when softened by age. Olivia opened it carefully. The ink had faded slightly, but the words were as piercing as ever. "My dearest Olivia, if you're holding this letter, the storm has passed. I imagine it was loud. Perhaps a hurricane, but I trusted you would weather it. I need you to know something I couldn't put in a will. I did not leave everything to you to punish them. I left it to you to honor the quiet things, love without performance, loyalty without conditions, dignity without applause. You understood that the value of a home is not in square footage but in whose footsteps echo in its halls. You loved me when there was nothing to gain. And that is the rarest kind of love. Do good with this, my dear. But also, live, travel to Florence, learn to cook with both hands. Write, laugh, find a way to keep softness in a world that rewards hardness. If they come to you someday, asking not for money, but for memory, let them in if your heart allows it. But never let them chip away at your peace. You were never ungrateful. You were simply unseen. Not anymore. I see you. I always did. Love, Grandma." Olivia read the letter 3 times before placing it in a leather folder marked personal, alongside her own journal. That evening, she stood on the porch, the same one where Eleanor once sipped tea and watched the wind move through the trees. She looked out over the yard, arms folded, and for the first time, the silence brought comfort instead of tension. Weeks later, Rachel, Greg's daughter, sent a message through the foundation. She had named her newborn Eleanor. "I know we haven't spoken," she wrote, "but I was wondering if you might someday share stories about her. Not the headlines, the real ones." Olivia didn't answer immediately. She waited until it felt right. Then she replied, "Yes. But only the true stories." At a community event hosted by the foundation, Olivia met one of Eleanor's long-lost nephews, Lucas, who had lived in Oregon for decades. He brought photographs of Eleanor from before she became the matriarch, smiling beside a young man holding a guitar. "She loved that old lake house," he said, laughing. "Used to sneak out to paint the sunrise." Through him, Olivia discovered relatives untouched by the recent war. Kind people, curious. Not all family had been corrupted. Some were simply scattered. 1 year after the reading that changed everything, Olivia hosted a memorial dinner. She invited only those who had shown genuine care: Eleanor's former caregiver, the hospice nurses, Lucas and his wife, Rachel and her child, even Mr. Randall and Sarah. They ate in the garden, beneath string lights and soft music, surrounded by photographs, laughter, and absence that didn't hurt quite as much anymore. At the end of the evening, Olivia stood by the mantel where Eleanor's portrait rested. She raised her glass. To the woman who saw what others missed. To the truth that outlives noise. To kindness that doesn't ask for applause. As fireflies blinked through the summer dusk and soft laughter floated across the yard, Olivia felt a quiet triumph settle deep in her bones. Not the kind that ends with fanfare, but the kind that roots itself, steady and unshakable. She had not only honored her grandmother. She had honored herself. And that was the real inheritance all along.